A group of established experts in the field of culture, including a distinguished guest from Germany, has been invited to South Korea for talks on ways to boost collaboration. So what is the purpose of boosting cultural collaboration? What do Korean artifacts on display in foreign museums share about the Korean culture? And what role does culture play in bridging conflict? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. I'm Min Sunhee. Here in the studio today, I have the General Director of the Humboldt Forum, Hartmut Dorgerloh, with me to share with us his thoughts on the importance of culture to bridge conflict and more. Mr. Dorgerloh, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Right, Mr. Dorgerloh, let's perhaps start then with a few words on the purpose of your trip here from Germany to South Korea.
It is my first visit to Korea, so I have a great time here meeting colleagues, talking about common projects, visiting museums, but also enjoying a little bit of the landscape, not only here in Seoul, but also in the southwest and in the southeast, learning a lot about Korean history and the glorious past, the rich culture, tradition, but also looking around what's going on in culture and in Korea today, meeting people, having this wonderful experience with Korean cuisine, which is a really great experience. So I'm a little bit of a Korean foodie right now.
Right,
so, so learning more and deepen my understanding of Korea in general. So that's the idea. And I'm here as a privileged partner, person of the so-called K Fellowship program, which is a very generous and privileged program hosted by Korean authorities for senior experts from abroad.
Right, and that program, it's part of efforts by the country here aimed at enhancing cultural exchanges beyond borders, right, Mr. Dorgerloh?
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on Korea's efforts to use culture to bridge differences or bring the global community closer?
I think it's a very, very important part of what we call about the so-called soft powers, education and culture and even the media. I think it is a great opportunity also to create a better understanding of Korean tradition and culture and also what's going on in Korea today worldwide. And of course, Korean pop and Korean cinema and K-chicken and everything now is was something that changed the image of Korea during the last years, not only in Germany tremendously, but there's much more than this. And I think culture is a perfect field also to foster the relation between people.
Right. And staying with that, Mr. Dorgerloh, what can you tell us about the public response to K-content, like you mentioned, music, dramas and films there in Germany?
I think it is very much in the focus of the public right now. So due to the fact that there are much more Koreans in Berlin and also in other places in Germany for many, many years, but now also on TV, there are more talks about Korean culture and about life in Korea. It's also a very attractive place to visit. So tourism is also an important aspect. So more and more people from Germany traveled to Korea, coming back and making kind of propaganda for Korea and saying, oh, it's such a great country, you have to go by yourself. And so I think it is a double-faced image. On the one hand side, we learn more and more about the rich culture on the Korean peninsula and about the great traditions and how important cultural heritage is also for an understanding of Korea nowadays. And on the other side, it is a high-tech, technology-based country. And I was really jealous when I was on the train station yesterday. We went to Gwangju, and there was no delay announced. So in Germany, it's a completely opposite situation right now.
I see. Right. And staying in Germany, Mr. Dorgerloh, the Humboldt Forum, it opened its doors amid the pandemic, I understand, to a bit of mixed public reaction. Would you like to take this opportunity today to perhaps touch upon those reactions in Germany and perhaps address also the museum's efforts to tackle those mixed reactions?
Yeah, the Humboldt Forum was a major, or is a major cultural project in Germany in the heart of the new capital. That means the old capital, the newborn or reborn capital, Berlin. It is based on a decision that was made by the Federal Parliament 20 years ago. So when the world was a little bit different from our world today. And the main idea was bringing the so-called non-European collections into the heart of the city. And on the other side, it was the idea to reconstruct the former royal palace that was there for centuries and that was demolished by the communists after the Second World War when it was damaged. So this was the major idea behind this project.
It's a very ambitious plan then.
Absolutely. And so it was always a controversial debate about the architecture and the cultural, the concept, if it's a good idea to bring non-European collections behind the reconstruction of a very German imperial facade and so on. But I think that's the DNA of our institution. That's the place to discuss. That's why we are not a museum. We want to become more than a museum. So we want to create.
Which is why you said it's more like a forum.
It's a forum. So bringing people together, changing perspective, listen to each other. So, and that is why I'm very happy that there are ongoing discussions about the Humboldt Forum, the presentations of the various museums in the building, but we are also hosting cultural events. We have a lot of film programs, open air festival, a wide range education program, and also we are a very attractive hotspot for tourists. So they're enjoying the view from the rooftop terrace, they're enjoying the restaurants and so on. So it's really a new urban quarter in Berlin, and we hope that there will be also a strong public attention on this place for the next years.
Right, hopefully, of course. And Mr. Dorgerloh, do tell us a bit about the Korean works of art that I understand are on display at the Humboldt Forum.
Yeah, the Humboldt Forum is a very complex structure, so we are hosting the university with its collections, the City Museum, but also the Ethnological Museum with collections from Africa, Oceania, and the Americas, but not at least also the Museum of Asian Art. And the small Korean gallery belongs to this museum. Small indicates that there is in Berlin, unfortunately, only a very, very small number of objects from Korea. It depends on the history of the museum in Berlin, and of course it's also part of the colonial history. So because these collections were mostly brought together around 1900, so at the peak of colonialism worldwide. And so it is one of our plans to enlarge this area, to learn more about Korean culture. But there are few objects, but they are excellent objects. And they are nearly completely exhibited. So in other cases, only some few examples from this collection from somewhere else in the world are in the showcases, because there's always a selection, because the museums in general are much bigger.
Right, of course. Mr. Dorgerloh, both Korea and Germany, they share a history of division. The former Korea remains divided, of course, and the latter Germany is now united. And that being said, do you suppose perhaps cultural exchanges between the two Koreas, South and North, could perhaps serve to pave a path, if you will, to better relations?
I think it's a very important aspect, because looking into my own biography, I grew up in the East, so on the other side of the wall. But East and West Germany were never divided so strictly than it is now here in Korea. So, for instance, my relatives from the West could visit us in the East, and I grew up with, I couldn't go to the Western side, but they came to us. And I grew up with West German TV and radio, so I was well informed also about the Western position, about what happens in the world, for example. So you cannot compare it. But from the German experience, it is very important to have some channels which are open to communicate, and culture could be a very wonderful and a very successful and fruitful, especially if music or theater and dance, there are cultural traditions with no borders. But it's especially when the political situation is hot, it's important that these channels are open for example, for a cultural or artistic exchange.
Right, of course. And also on the topic of ties, Mr. Dorgerloh, Germany, it's a very popular destination for Korean scholars of classical music as well as art, of course. And I understand the education in Germany, and do correct me if I'm wrong, is more based on practice-centered approaches rather than theory. Do you care to elaborate on that?
Yes, I think that's a very strong German tradition, not only in music, but also in arts, but also in many, many other professions, that we have this double-focused way of education. So that's always try to combine practical approaches with theories. And one of the neighbors of the Humboldt Forum is Berlin Music University, and so we are very, very happy that there are so many Korean scholars next to us, and hopefully they will play also a role and their instruments in our cultural program, because music ethnology is also a very, very important part of our collections.
Right, that is good to know, of course. Mr. Dorgerloh, one final question before you leave us then. Do share with us some of your plans with regard to advancing cultural collaboration, that is, between South Korea and Germany.
I think the Humboldt Forum could be a good place for creating something together. So that's not our idea just to invite one of these huge traveling exhibitions, but we also want to meet people. We want to bring people together from different fields, from universities, but also normal people, and people from different fields, what means also from different cultural backgrounds. And so perhaps a Korean festival could be something, or something more, learning more about films from Korea, which are not so popular perhaps worldwide, but very popular in Korea. And of course, exhibitions will be an important part of our collaboration programs. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here to discuss with the colleagues from Korea. How can we follow also in this relation our main principle, don't talk about us without us.
Right, I see. So we need to talk about Korea with you in mind as well. And we have a bit more time, I understand. Mr. Dorgerloh, I was wondering, you talked about films a while back. Have you watched any Korean films?
Yeah, the last one I remember was Parasite.
What do you suppose was behind the popularity of Parasite across the globe?
I think it was a very, very
Did it deal with universal issues that you
yes,
could relate to?
Yes, of course, universal issues about different social levels and the rich and the poor, and it was very well constructed. So it was it was full of surprises and changes, and it was the acting was fascinating, and so no, it was really it was a daily life story. On the other side, it was such an exception, so it was great.
Do you suppose it had any similarities, perhaps, to reflections of life in Germany as well?
Yes, of course, because we have the social gap is becoming wider and wider, and this is a serious problem in Germany as well. And of course, we have an increasing number of people living in Germany with a migration background. That's also a great problem. And I think how to gap the bridges, how to bridge
the differences.
The differences. I think it's a very, very important issue and a great challenge for all societies worldwide. I'm not so familiar with the situation in Korea right now, but in Berlin, for example, in the Humboldt Forum, we are very, very much in these so-called outreach programs, how to attract people, especially younger visitors, how to enlarge audiences, and so especially for communities which are not so familiar with culture, even with German culture or museum tradition. So I think it's a very, very important aspect.
Right, of course, to get the members of the public more engaged in cultural efforts.
Yes,
and
citizen science, for example, is also an important part.
Right, so you do have a big task ahead of you. All right, Mr. Dorgerloh, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts today.
Thank you so much.
Right, and on that note, we say goodbye for this week. We'll be back starting Monday with more insights. Have a good weekend. Thank you for watching.